A wounded German Shepherd led a single mom to a remote cabin. What was inside made her call 911. At first, she thought the bleeding dog just needed help, but when it dragged her deep into the forest, she stumbled onto something far more terrifying. An abandoned cabin, with half-eaten meals still on the table, a child's toy truck in the corner, and a locked trunk holding secrets no one was ever meant to see. But then she saw him, a shadow in the woods, a rifle glinting in the sunlight, and the dog's growl told her the unthinkable. This was no accident. Someone was watching them. Inside that cabin lay the truth about a family missing for 10 years, and a son who may never have left the forest. What happened in that cabin? And will her discovery finally bring justice or put her and her child in even greater danger? Let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. If you like stories that connect us, don't forget to subscribe before you leave. With morning air held that crisp autumn bite that made Oregon forest feel magical. Golden sunlight filtered through rust-colored leaves, creating dancing shadows on the winding road ahead. Rhea Monroe gripped the worn steering wheel of her old SUV, the grocery bags rustling in the back with each curve they took. "Mom, can I have one of the cookies we bought?" 8-year-old Ethan asked from the passenger seat, his feet swinging above the floor mats. Rhea glanced at her son with a warm smile. "After lunch, sweetie. We just got those." Her words cut off as she slammed on the brakes, the SUV's tires screeching against the asphalt. Ethan jerked forward, his seatbelt catching him with a snap. "Are you okay?" Rhea reached over, her heart pounding as she checked her son. Her eyes darted between Ethan and the reason for their sudden stop. A large German Shepherd standing in the middle of the road. "It's fur matted and dirty." "I'm fine," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide as he stared through the windshield. "Mom, that dog looks hurt." The German Shepherd swayed slightly, favoring its right front paw. What caught Rhea's attention wasn't just the dog's obvious injury, but something else, a strip of fabric wrapped loosely around its neck. The material was stained dark red in places, making her stomach clench with worry. "Stay in the car," Rhea instructed, unbuckling her seatbelt. The autumn air rushed in as she opened her door, bringing with it the scent of pine needles and damp earth. "But Mom, just for a minute." "Ethan, I need to make sure it's safe." Rhea approached slowly, her hands held out in front of her. The German Shepherd watched her with intelligent brown eyes, its ears perked forward despite its obvious exhaustion. "Hey there," she called softly. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dog didn't growl or show any signs of aggression. Instead, it took a few limping steps backward, maintaining eye contact with Rhea. There was something almost human in its gaze, a desperate intelligence that made her pause. "Mom," Ethan called from the car. "What's wrong with its neck?" Rhea squinted at the fabric. It wasn't a collar. It looked more like a torn piece of clothing, hastily tied as a makeshift bandage. But why would a wounded dog have a bandage unless someone had tried to help it? And why was it out here alone? The German Shepherd took another step back, then turned its head toward the dense tree line. When it looked back at Rhea, it was with an unmistakable purpose. The dog repeated this motion, looking at her, then the forest, then back at her. "I think," Rhea began, her voice trailing off as she watched the dog's deliberate movements. "I think it wants us to follow it, like Lassie." Ethan had unbuckled his seatbelt and pressed his face against the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass. The dog limped a few more steps toward the forest edge, then stopped and looked back again. There was no mistaking the intention in its behavior now. Rhea bit her lower lip, weighing her options. Every practical bone in her body screamed that following a strange dog into the woods was a terrible idea. She was a single mom with responsibilities, with a young son to protect. They had groceries in the car, including ice cream that was probably already starting to melt. But something about the dog's eyes, about that bloodied piece of fabric around its neck, tugged at her heart. Someone had tried to help this animal. What if that person was now the one who needed help? "Ethan, come here, but stay behind me," Rhea finally called, making a decision she hoped she wouldn't regret. She heard the car door open and close, followed by the sound of her son's sneakers crunching on fallen leaves. "Are we really going to follow it?" Ethan asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension as he gripped the back of her jacket. The German Shepherd had moved further into the tree line but remained visible, those intelligent eyes still fixed on them. It was clearly waiting. "Yes," Rhea answered, taking Ethan's hand firmly in hers. "But you stay right next to me, okay? No running ahead, no matter what." "Okay, Mom," Ethan agreed, squeezing her hand tightly. They took their first steps off the asphalt and onto the carpet of fallen leaves. The forest seemed to close around them immediately, the sounds of the occasional passing car growing muffled. Tall Douglas firs towered overhead, their branches creating a natural canopy that filtered the morning sunlight into gentle beams. The German Shepherd limped ahead of them, maintaining a steady pace despite its injury. Every few steps, it would pause and look back as if making sure they were still following. The dog moved with purpose, weaving between trees and over fallen logs with a familiarity that suggested it knew exactly where it was going. Mom. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. What if it's leading us to its home? Maybe, Rhea responded, trying to sound more confident than she felt. She kept her eyes on the dog's form ahead of them, watching as it disappeared deeper into the trees, its gray fur blending with the shadows of the forest. The further they went from the road, the more Rhea's doubt grew. What was she doing, following a strange dog into the woods with her 8-year-old son? But each time she thought about turning back, the image of that bloodied fabric around the dog's neck would flash in her mind. Someone had tried to help this animal, someone who might now be in trouble themselves. The German Shepherd's form became harder to see as it moved deeper into the forest, its gray fur almost ghost-like among the trees. Rhea felt Ethan's hand tighten in hers as they followed, the crunch of leaves and twigs under their feet the only sound breaking the forest silence. The dense brush scratched at Rhea's legs as she and Ethan pushed through the forest undergrowth. Thorny blackberry vines caught at their clothes, and fallen branches crackled beneath their feet. The German Shepherd's occasional bark echoed through the trees, guiding them forward even when they couldn't see it through the thick foliage. Mom. My feet hurt, Ethan whispered, his small hand clutching hers tightly. They'd been walking for almost 30 minutes, and the morning sun barely penetrated the thick canopy above them, just a little further. Rhea assured him, though she had no idea if that was true. The forest felt different here, eerily quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals, just the distant bark of the shepherd pulling them onward. They pushed through a particularly thick patch of ferns, and suddenly the ground sloped downward. Rhea held Ethan's hand tighter as they carefully made their way down what appeared to be a natural ravine. The trees thinned slightly, and there, nestled among them like a secret, sat a wooden cabin. Rhea's breath caught in her throat. The structure was so well hidden by the surrounding vegetation that they might have walked right past it if the shepherd hadn't led them here. The cabin looked like it belonged in another time, its wooden walls weathered but solid. But something wasn't right. Rhea's eyes caught details that made her skin prickle. Laundry still hung on a line, strung between the trees, swaying slightly in the breeze. Work tools, a hammer, some garden implements, lay scattered near a woodpile as if their owner had just set them down. For a moment, the windows were clouded with what looked like smoke stains, telling a story Rhea wasn't sure she wanted to know. The German Shepherd stood at the cabin's front door, scratching at the wood with increasing urgency. Its nails made a desperate sound against the planks. Should we go closer? Ethan asked, pressing against her side. Rhea swallowed hard. Every maternal instinct told her to turn around to get her son back to the safety of their car. But the scene before her spoke of recent habitation and possible trouble. What if someone needed help? Stay behind me, she instructed, moving carefully toward the cabin. The wooden steps creaked under their weight as they approached the door. The shepherd's scratching grew more intense. With trembling fingers, Rhea reached for the door handle. The metal was cold against her skin as she turned it, and the door opened with a long, low creak that seemed to echo through the silent forest. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light that penetrated the dim interior. The air smelled stale, with undertones of wood smoke and something else she couldn't quite identify. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, the cabin's interior came into focus. A small table still held plates with the remains of a meal, as if the occupants had simply walked away in the middle of eating. Cups sat half full of what might have been coffee or tea, now covered in a film of dust. On a braided rug in the center of the room, a red toy truck lay on its side, its wheels slightly spinning as if moved by an invisible hand. Mom, Ethan whispered, his voice tight with worry. Where are the people? I don't know, sweetie, Rhea answered honestly, her eyes scanning the single room. A bed was pushed against one wall, its covers rumpled. A pot sat on the cold wood stove, and curtains fluttered at the windows despite there being no breeze inside. Don't touch anything, Rhea instructed firmly, placing a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. The scene before them felt frozen in time, like a photograph of a moment that had been suddenly and violently interrupted. As she surveyed the room, something caught her eye. Under the bed, partially hidden by a fallen blanket, she spotted what looked like an old trunk. It was made of dark wood with metal bindings, and a heavy padlock secured its lid. The German Shepherd, which had been investigating the cabin's corners, suddenly focused on the trunk. It rushed to the bed and began pawing at the floor near the trunk, its nails scraping frantically against the wooden planks. The dog's behavior grew more urgent, its movements almost desperate as it tried to reach the locked container. Rhea's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the shepherd's bizarre behavior. What could be in that trunk that would cause such a reaction? The dog's claws continued to scratch at the floor, and its whines filled the otherwise silent cabin with an undercurrent of desperation. The scene felt wrong in every way. The abandoned meal, the toy truck, the mysterious locked trunk that seemed to hold such significance for their four-legged guide. Every instinct told Rhea they shouldn't be here, that they were intruding on something private and possibly dangerous. Yet the shepherd's frantic pawing at the floor near the trunk suggested that, whatever mystery lay before them, it was far from over. Rhea's hands trembled as she pulled the heavy trunk from beneath the bed, the German shepherd watching intently. Metal scraped against wood, creating an eerie sound that echoed through the cabin. The trunk was old and battered, its surface covered in deep scratches that told stories of years of rough handling. "Stay back, Ethan," she cautioned, noticing her son's eager approach. The trunk's lock hung uselessly, partially broken, as if someone had tried to force it open before. Rhea glanced around and spotted a rusty crowbar leaning against the porch door frame. "I'll be right back." The autumn air hit her face as she stepped outside to retrieve the tool. Back inside, she wedged the crowbar into the gap where the lock held weakly. With a grunt of effort, she pushed down hard. The metal groaned, then gave way with a sharp crack that made both her and Ethan jump. "What's inside, Mom?" Ethan whispered, inching closer despite her earlier warning. The lid creaked open, releasing a musty smell of old paper and forgotten memories. Rhea's heart pounded as she began pulling items out one by one. Letters, yellowed with age, spilled onto the floor. Beneath them lay a stack of newspaper clippings, their edges worn and crumbling. Her breath caught as she read the headline of the topmost article, "Local Family Still Missing." After 3 months, the date showed it was from 10 years ago. More clippings revealed the same story, a mother and young son who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a devastated community and unanswered questions. "Mom, look at this." Ethan's voice pulled her attention away from the articles. He held up a photograph, its colors slightly faded but still clear. In it, a young boy about Ethan's age smiled at the camera, clutching something that made Rhea's heart skip a beat, a red toy truck, identical to the one sitting on the cabin floor just feet away. "I've seen this before," Rhea murmured, taking the photo from Ethan's hands. The image stirred a memory, a missing person flyer that had been posted at Jerry's gas station. 4 years. She'd seen it countless times while filling up her car. The boy's smiling face becoming a familiar sight that had always tugged at her heart. With shaking hands, Rhea began reading through the letters. They were written in a hurried, slanting hand, as if the writer had been rushing or afraid. As she pieced together the story, her throat tightened with emotion. "Dear Sarah," one letter began. "If you're reading this, I finally found the courage to leave. I can't let him hurt us anymore. The bruises are getting harder to hide, and I see the fear in Tommy's eyes whenever his father raises his voice. I've been saving money, little by little. There's a place in the woods where we can stay until I figure out our next move." Rhea's eyes filled with tears as she read letter after letter, each one revealing more of the mother's desperate plan to escape an abusive marriage. The woman, Claire, she signed her letters, had documented everything: the escalating violence, the careful planning, the secret bank account she'd built up over months. The German shepherd whined softly, pressing its nose against the scattered papers. Rhea reached out absently to pat its head, her mind racing with the implications of what they'd found. This cabin must have been Claire's planned refuge, but something had gone terribly wrong. "Mom?" Ethan's voice quavered. "Are these people okay?" Before Rhea could answer, a sound from outside made her freeze. The distinct crunch of leaves under footsteps, the heavy and deliberate to be an animal. The German shepherd's ears perked up, but surprisingly, it didn't bark. Heart thundering in her chest, Rhea slowly rose to her feet. "Stay very quiet," she whispered to Ethan, who nodded with wide eyes. She moved cautiously to the window, trying to keep her body hidden behind the frame as she peered out. The forest seemed still at first glance, but then she saw it, movement in the tree line. A figure stood partially hidden behind a large oak tree, watching the cabin. Though she couldn't make out any features, something about the way the person stood, half concealed in the shadows, sent ice through her veins. The German shepherd remained eerily calm, its eyes fixed on the window where Rhea stood frozen, as if it knew exactly who was out there in the gathering darkness of the forest. The German shepherd's sudden change in demeanor sent chills down Rhea's spine. The dog's friendly disposition vanished in an instant, replaced by a defensive stance, hackles raised, ears pinned back, and a deep growl rumbling from its chest. Its dark eyes were fixed intently on something through the trees. That's when Rhea saw it, sunlight catching on metal, the unmistakable glint of a rifle barrel partially hidden among the leaves. Her heart nearly stopped as the figure shifted, and the weapon became clearly visible for a split second before disappearing into the thick brush. "Ethan." Rhea's voice came out as a harsh whisper. She grabbed her son's arm, perhaps too roughly, but terror had taken over her maternal instincts. "We need to leave. Now." "But Mom, what about now, Ethan?" She snatched up her purse with trembling hands, leaving the scattered letters and photographs where they lay. Every second they remained in the cabin felt like tempting fate. They burst out of the cabin's door, Rhea practically pushing Ethan ahead of her. Their feet stumbled over exposed roots and fallen branches as they tried to retrace their steps back to the trail. But the forest looked different now, more threatening, with shadows that seemed to stretch like grasping fingers across their path. Behind them, the German shepherd's barks echoed through the trees. The dog hadn't followed them, but instead circled the cabin frantically, its deep barks filled with urgency and warning. The sound made Rhea's skin crawl. It wasn't just alarm in those barks, but something that sounded almost like recognition. The dog. Ethan cried, trying to turn back. "We can't leave it. It won't come." Rhea pulled her son forward, her fingers fumbling in her purse for her phone. "We have to get help." They stopped behind a large cedar tree, both breathing heavily. Rhea's hands shook as she dialed 911, nearly dropping the phone twice before managing to press the right buttons. The connection crackled. They barely had one bar of service out here. 911. "What's your emergency?" The dispatcher's calm voice seemed surreal against the backdrop of their panic. "I'm in a cabin in the woods off Highway 26. Rhea spoke quickly, trying to keep her voice steady for Ethan's sake. We found evidence about a missing persons case. Old newspaper clippings about a mother and son who disappeared 10 years ago. But someone's here with a rifle watching the cabin. Are you in immediate danger?" The dispatcher asked. "We've left the cabin, but yes, I think we're in danger." Rhea swallowed hard. "Please, we need help. Can you describe your exact location?" Rhea described the turnoff they'd taken from the highway, the approximate distance they'd walked, the ravine where the cabin sat. Her voice cracked as she added, "Please hurry. Deputies are being dispatched to your location." The dispatcher assured her, "But given the remote area, it may take some time for them to reach you. Can you make it safely back to your vehicle?" "I think so," Rhea whispered, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "We'll try. Stay on the line with me if you can," the dispatcher instructed. They continued moving through the forest, trying to be both quick and quiet, an almost impossible combination on the leaf-strewn ground. The German shepherd's barks grew fainter behind them, but each echoing sound made Rhea jump. What did the dog know? Who was it trying to warn them about? Ethan's small hand clutched hers tightly as they picked their way through the underbrush. His earlier excitement about their discovery had transformed into palpable fear. Rhea could feel him trembling. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, though her own heart was racing. "Help is coming," as if in answer to her words. A faint sound carried through the trees, the distant wail of sirens. The sound should have brought relief, but instead, it only heightened Rhea's sense of wrongness. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, like a living thing disturbed from long slumber. She clutched Ethan's hand tighter, pulling him closer to her side. The sirens grew slightly louder, but they still sounded so far away. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every rustle of leaves made her heart jump. They had stumbled onto something that had been hidden away in this remote cabin for a decade, something that someone had gone to great lengths to keep secret. The forest no longer felt like a place of refuge or adventure. It felt like a trap, closing in around them with each step. They had awakened something here, something that had been sleeping beneath layers of time and secrets, something that was never meant to be found. The wail of sirens grew louder until 3 patrol cars pulled up on the narrow forest road near the cabin. Deputies spilled out, their boots crunching on fallen leaves as they approached with weapons drawn. Rhea held Ethan close as they watched from a safe distance, the morning sun now high overhead. "Clear." The shout echoed from inside the cabin, followed by more all-clears as the deputies swept through every room. Rhea's heart pounded as she waited, hoping they would find whoever had been watching them with the rifle. The German shepherd paced anxiously near the cabin's porch, whining and looking between Rhea and the door. An animal control van arrived, and officers approached the dog carefully with a catch pole. Though the dog didn't resist capture, it kept straining toward Rhea, its eyes fixed on her with an almost human desperation. "Please be gentle with him," Rhea called out as they loaded the dog into the van. "He's injured." A deputy wearing a nameplate that read Matthews approached them, notebook in hand. His weathered face creased with concern as Rhea described finding the trunk and its contents. "Ma'am, we've documented everything you mentioned," Deputy Matthews said, his voice low and careful. "The trunk and photos will be taken as evidence. But I should tell you, this case you've stumbled onto, it's what we call an old ghost story around here. The Miller family disappearance." Rhea frowned. "Ghost story?" Matthews nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. 10 years ago, Sarah Miller and her 8-year-old son vanished without a trace. Some say they ran from her husband. Others think something worse happened. Lots of theories, but no real answers. We've had dozens of reported sightings over the years, but nothing concrete ever came of them. The dismissive tone in his voice made Ria's jaw clench. She watched as evidence technicians carried out the trunk, now sealed in large paper bags. The toy truck Ethan had found was also carefully packaged away. What about the person we saw? Ria pressed. Someone was definitely here with a rifle. We'll keep investigating, Matthews assured her. But his tone suggested he didn't expect to find anything. Probably just a hunter who was startled to find people out here. This area is pretty remote. Back home that evening, after tucking an exhausted Ethan into bed, Ria sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. She couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something important, something that shouldn't be dismissed as just another dead end. Sighting. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she searched for information about the Miller case. Old newspaper articles painted a disturbing picture. Sarah Miller, 32 years old, had filed multiple domestic violence reports against her husband in the months before she disappeared. Her son, Tommy, had just started 3rd grade. The last confirmed sighting was at a grocery store on September 15th. 10 years ago. Ria clicked through grainy photographs from news reports, Sarah's bright smile in her driver's license photo, Tommy's gap-toothed grin in a school picture. The same boy from the photograph they'd found in the trunk. Mom? Ria looked up to find Ethan standing in the kitchen doorway. His favorite stuffed bear clutched tight against his chest. His face was pale in the laptop's blue glow. "What are you doing up, sweetie?" she asked, opening her arms. He came over and climbed into her lap, something he hadn't done in months. "I can't sleep," he whispered. "I keep thinking about that boy in the picture. Mom, what if he's still out there? What if he's scared and hiding?" Ria hugged him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. The question hit her hard not just because of its devastating implications, but because it was exactly what she'd been wondering herself. That cabin hadn't looked abandoned for 10 years. The dishes on the table, the fresh laundry on the line, someone had been living there recently. And the dog. The way it had led them there, its desperate attempts to communicate something, Mom. Ethan's voice quavered. "Are we going to help find him?" Ria looked down at her son's worried face, then at the photographs on her screen, a family torn apart, a mystery left unsolved for a decade. The deputies might have written it off as an old ghost story, but she couldn't. Not after what they'd seen. She pressed a kiss to Ethan's forehead. "Yes, sweetie. I promise you, we won't let this mystery go unanswered. Someone out there knows the truth about what happened to Tommy and his mom, and we're going to find out what it is." The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Ria pulled into a parking spot outside the cozy corner cafe. After dropping Ethan at school, she needed coffee and time to think through everything that had happened yesterday. The cheerful bell above the door chimed as she entered, and the smell of fresh-baked muffins and coffee wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Finding a quiet corner booth, Ria spread out the printouts of old newspaper articles she'd gathered. The waitress brought her coffee in a thick ceramic mug, steam curling into the air as Ria added cream and sugar. "The Miller case," she muttered to herself, scanning the headlines. "What really happened to you, Clara?" A soft gasp from nearby made her look up. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes stood beside her table, coffee cup trembling slightly in her weathered hands. "Did you say Clara Miller?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ria nodded, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. "Please, join me. I'm Ria Monroe. Did you know her?" The woman settled into the booth with careful movements. "Evelyn Carter. I lived near their cabin, years ago." Before, she trailed off, glancing around as if checking who might be listening. Before everything happened, Ria leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. "Please, tell me about her. Anything you remember could help." Evelyn's fingers twisted the paper napkin in her lap. "Clara was such a kind soul. Always had a smile for everyone, even when you could see the pain behind it. She used to bring me fresh-baked bread. Said it was too much for just her and Tommy." Her voice caught on the boy's name. "The police reports mentioned domestic abuse," Ria said quietly. Evelyn nodded, her eyes growing distant. "That monster she married, he kept her isolated out there. We all saw the bruises she tried to hide with long sleeves in summer. But Clara was stronger than she looked. She had plans." "Plans?" Ria pressed gently. The older woman glanced around again before leaning closer. "About 2 weeks before she disappeared, Clara came to me. She was scared but determined. Said she'd been saving money, making arrangements. She was going to take Tommy and run, somewhere her husband could never find them." Ria's heart pounded. This matched the letters they'd found in the trunk, but they never made it No. Evelyn's voice cracked. The next thing we knew, they were gone. The police searched, but she reached across the table, gripping Ria's hand with surprising strength. Listen to me carefully, dear. That place, that cabin, it's cursed. Marked by what happened there. Some truths are better left in the ground. I can't just ignore this, Ria protested. What if there's a chance to finally uncover what happened? You have a child too, don't you? Evelyn's eyes were sharp now, knowing. Think about him. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Sometimes the searching puts you in more danger than the knowing. The drive home felt longer than usual, Evelyn's warning echoing in Ria's mind. The autumn sun was setting by the time she pulled into her driveway, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. After picking up Ethan from his after-school program, they had a quiet dinner of spaghetti and meatballs. But Ria couldn't shake the unsettled feeling in her stomach. Ethan was already asleep when she heard it, a scratching sound at the back door. At first, she thought it might be tree branches in the wind, but then came a familiar whine. Heart racing, Ria crept to the kitchen and peered through the glass panel there. Illuminated by the porch light, sat the German Shepherd. Its intelligent eyes met hers, and it scratched at the door again, more urgently this time. Somehow, it had escaped from animal control and found its way to her house, found her. The dog's makeshift bandage was gone, but the wound beneath appeared to be healing. As Ria stood frozen, wondering what to do, the shepherd pressed its nose against the glass, leaving a smudge mark. Its eyes seemed to plead with her, carrying a message she couldn't quite understand but couldn't ignore either. Despite Evelyn's warnings about leaving some truths buried, Ria knew in that moment that she was already too deeply involved to turn back. The dog's appearance at her door felt like more than coincidence, it felt like a sign. Something or someone was trying to tell her something, and she needed to listen. Ria couldn't leave the German Shepherd outside in the cold. After a moment's hesitation, she opened the back door. The dog padded in quietly, its nails clicking on the kitchen tile. Though it had been through so much, there was a gentle dignity in how it carried itself. You need a good bath, Ria murmured, noticing the matted fur and dirt. The shepherd allowed her to lead it to the bathroom, seeming to understand her intentions. As she ran warm water and worked shampoo through its thick coat, her fingers caught on something tangled deep in the fur around its neck. Hold still, she whispered, carefully working the object free. Her breath caught when she saw what it was, a rusted old key, its bronze surface corroded with age. It had been wrapped so tightly in the dog's fur that it must have been there for months, maybe longer. Ria spent the next hour grooming the shepherd, her mind racing with possibilities. The key had to mean something. It had to open something important at the cabin. Sleep eluded her that night as she lay awake, the key sitting heavy on her nightstand. When morning came, Ria packed Ethan a lunch and explained they needed to go back to the cabin. But what about the man with the gun? Ethan asked, his young face pinched with worry. The police have been watching the area, Ria assured him, though she wasn't entirely confident herself. And we have our protective friend now, she gestured to the shepherd, who sat alert by the door as if it knew exactly where they were heading. The drive felt different this time, more purposeful. The autumn morning was crisp and clear, sunlight filtering through golden leaves. The shepherd sat calmly in the back seat next to Ethan, who had already started calling it Scout. When they reached the cabin, Ria parked closer this time, right by the front steps. The place looked different in the morning light, less menacing, more sad, like a forgotten photograph slowly fading in the sun. Inside, dust motes still danced in the beams of light streaming through dirty windows. The toy truck still sat on the rug where they'd last seen it, but now Ria noticed something she hadn't before. The way the rug's corner was slightly turned up, as if it had been moved often. The shepherd went straight to that spot, pawing at the rug's edge. Ria's heart began to pound as she pulled the rug back completely, revealing wooden floorboards that looked slightly different from the rest. There, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it, was a small keyhole. Mom, look. Ethan pointed excitedly. Try the key. With trembling fingers, Ria inserted the rusted key. It stuck for a moment, then turned with a loud click. A trapdoor swung open, revealing a dark space below and a set of sturdy wooden stairs leading down. Before Ria could stop it, the shepherd darted past her and disappeared into the darkness. Stay behind me, she told Ethan, pulling out her phone's flashlight. The beam illuminated their way. As they descended carefully into what appeared to be some kind of bunker, the air was stale, but not unpleasant, as if the space had been well ventilated at some point. As Ria's light swept the walls, her heart clenched. Children's drawings were taped everywhere, crayon pictures of houses, families, and what looked like the German Shepherd itself. Some were signed Tommy in wobbly letters. A small cot sat against one wall, its faded blue blanket still neatly made. A child's backpack leaned against it, covered in dust but looking ready for a school day that never came. The whole space felt like a moment frozen in time, preserved like a museum exhibit of someone's last day. The shepherd stood by a corner, whining softly. Rhea approached, her flashlight beam revealing a small wooden box tucked almost out of sight. Inside was a notebook, no, a diary, its cover worn but intact. With shaking hands, Rhea opened to the first page. The handwriting was hurried but clear, and the words made her blood run cold. "If you're reading this, it means he found us. Mom." Ethan's voice quavered in the dim light. "What does it say?" Rhea clutched the diary to her chest, her mind racing. The bunker suddenly felt too small, too close. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this hidden room had been more than a hiding place. It had been a sanctuary, a desperate mother's attempt to create safety in a world that had offered none. The shepherd sat beside them, its presence somehow reassuring. Whatever secrets this diary held, whatever tragedy had played out here, the dog had kept its silent vigil all these years. Now it had led them here, to this moment, to these words written by a mother's desperate hand. Rhea settled on the dusty floor of the bunker, pulling Ethan close to her side. The shepherd lay at their feet, watchful as always. The diary's pages were worn but legible, filled with neat handwriting that sometimes grew shaky and urgent. "Should we read it?" Rhea asked Ethan softly, knowing they were about to uncover something both important and potentially frightening. Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with curiosity and concern. "Maybe it will help us understand what happened to them." Rhea took a deep breath and began reading aloud. April 15th. "Tommy and I have been here for 3 days now. The bunker is cold at night, but we have blankets and Scout keeps us warm. My boy is so brave. He hasn't complained once. He draws pictures to pass the time, says therefore when we can go home again. But we can't go home. Not ever." The shepherd's ears perked up at its old name, Scout. Rhea continued reading, her voice growing softer as Clara's words painted a picture of desperate days and frightened nights. April 20th. "Robert drove by the cabin today. Scout gave us warning before we heard the truck. We stayed so quiet in the bunker, hardly daring to breathe. Tommy held onto me so tight. When will this end? How long can we hide?" Ethan pressed closer to his mother as she read. The bunker felt smaller somehow, as if Clara's fears still lingered in the stale air. April 25th. "The food is holding out, but I'm giving Tommy the bigger portions. He needs his strength. Scout caught a rabbit today, good dog. Such a good protector. Tommy says Scout is our guardian angel with fur. Maybe he's right." Rhea's voice cracked as she read entries describing Clara's determination to keep her son safe. Her terror when she heard vehicles approaching. Her quiet celebrations of small victories. A full day without fear. A moment of laughter with Tommy. A successful trip to gather berries without being seen. May 2nd. "Tommy's fever is finally breaking. I was so scared we can't go to a doctor. Can't risk being found. Scout stayed by his bed the whole time, wouldn't leave even to eat. The dog knows. They always know." The entries grew more desperate as May progressed. Clara wrote about Robert's increasing presence in the area, about his angry shouts echoing through the trees, about Tommy's nightmares. May 10th. "I think he's getting closer. Found boot prints by the creek today. Scout growls more often now. Tommy asked when we can leave. Go somewhere far away. Soon, I tell him. Soon. But where is safe? Where can we hide that he won't find us?" Rhea's hands trembled as she turned to the final pages. The writing was messier now, rushed and frantic. May 15th. "Scout won't stop barking. Robert's truck, I heard it. Too close. Tommy's hiding in our special spot. He knows what to do. Stay quiet. Stay still. Scout will protect." The last entry trailed off in a jagged line. The words growing increasingly desperate. "He's here. I have to hide him. God help us." The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. Ethan's small hand found Rhea's and squeezed tight. The shepherd suddenly lifted its head, ears alert, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Rhea's heart jumped as a shadow passed across the small window near the bunker's ceiling. Without thinking, she shoved the diary into her jacket pocket and grabbed Ethan's hand. "Stay behind me," she whispered, hurrying up the wooden stairs. The cabin was empty when they emerged, sunlight streaming through dusty windows exactly as they'd left it. But something felt different, disturbed. Rhea could have sworn the toy truck on the floor had moved slightly. She checked every room, her heart pounding. Nothing. No sign of whoever had passed by the window. The shepherd followed close behind, still growling softly, its attention focused on the trees outside. When they regrouped in the main room, Ethan's face was pale, but thoughtful. He looked around the cabin with new understanding, seeing it through Tommy's eyes perhaps, as both sanctuary and prison. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the thick silence. What if the boy never left? That night, sleep came fitfully to Rhea. In her dreams, she wandered through misty forest paths, following the shadow of a small boy who always remained just out of reach. He darted between trees, leaving only echoes of childish laughter behind. The shepherd, Scout, trotted beside her in the dream, leading her deeper into the woods. But every time she got close to the boy, he would vanish like morning dew. Rhea woke before dawn, her heart racing. Scout lay at the foot of her bed, ears perked up, watching her intently. The dream clung to her like cobwebs, refusing to fade with wakefulness. She knew she had to go back to the cabin. As pale morning light filtered through the trees, Rhea and Scout made their way along the now familiar forest path. Ethan was safely at school, giving her the freedom to investigate without worrying about his safety. The autumn air was crisp, their breath forming small clouds in the chilly morning. Near the cabin's front steps, something made Rhea stop short. There, in the soft earth, were footprints, fresh ones pressed into the morning dew. They weren't the heavy boot prints of deputies or her own sneaker marks. These were bare human feet, the toes spread wide like someone who rarely wore shoes. Her heart pounding, Rhea knelt to examine them closer. They led away from the cabin, heading deeper into the forest. Scout's behavior changed immediately. The dog's tail wagged with excitement, and it began pulling at her sleeve, urging her to follow the tracks. Okay, she whispered, straightening up. Show me. They followed the trail through dense underbrush, Scout leading the way with confident steps. The footprints wound between trees, sometimes disappearing on rocky ground only to reappear in patches of soft earth. Whoever made them knew these woods intimately. After 20 minutes of careful tracking, they came upon a clearing. There, partially hidden by low-hanging branches, stood a makeshift shelter. It was a lean-to structure, crafted from fallen branches and bark, with pine boughs woven together to create a rough roof. It looked like something from a survival manual, built by someone who knew how to live off the land. Rhea approached cautiously, Scout still remarkably calm beside her. Inside the shelter, she found evidence of long-term habitation. A bed of dried grass and leaves was packed down in one corner, covered with what looked like old blankets, weathered but serviceable. Animal bones were scattered near a small fire pit, picked clean and clearly used for food. But what made her breath catch was a small object propped against one wall, a hand-carved wooden toy. It was rough but carefully made, whittled from a single piece of wood into the shape of a dog. The craftsmanship showed both skill and patience, though the wood was weathered with age. As Rhea reached for the carving, a twig snapped behind her. Scout's ears perked up, but instead of growling, the dog let out a soft, almost plaintive whine. Rhea turned slowly, her heart in her throat. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a gaunt young man. His hair was long and matted, clothes worn and patched with what looked like animal hides. In his hands, he gripped a rifle, old but well-maintained. His eyes were wild yet intelligent, darting between Rhea and Scout with the wariness of a creature used to being hunted. Scout's reaction was extraordinary. The dog, who had been so protective of Rhea, showed no aggression. Instead, it whined again, tail wagging slowly, taking a few steps toward the man. The stranger's stance softened slightly at the dog's approach. Rhea stood absolutely still, her mind racing. The young man would be in his early 20s now, the right age. His features, though weathered and sharp with hardship, held echoes of the boy from the photographs. The way Scout recognized him, the location so close to the cabin, the years of isolation evident in his feral appearance. Tommy, she whispered, hardly daring to breathe. The man's grip tightened on the rifle, but his eyes showed a flicker of recognition at the name. Scout moved closer to him, and with trembling fingers, he reached down to touch the dog's head, a gesture of familiarity, of long-ago comfort. In that moment, the impossible truth crystallized in Rhea's mind. This was Clara Miller's missing son, somehow alive after all these years. He hadn't vanished without a trace. He had survived, living like a ghost in these woods, with only Scout as his link to his former life. The lost boy from the photographs had grown into this wild young man, carrying the weight of his past in silence among the trees. The magnitude of the discovery left Rhea breathless. Here, standing before her, was the answer to a decade-old mystery. Clara's final act had succeeded. She had hidden her son so well that he had remained safe, though at a terrible cost. Tommy had grown up alone in the wilderness, protected by Scout, learning to survive in a world far removed from the one he'd been born into. Rhea raised her hands slowly, showing she meant no harm. Her heart ached at the fear and wariness in the young man's eyes. He looked like a wounded animal, ready to bolt at any sudden movement. "It's okay," she said softly, keeping her voice gentle and steady. "I found your mother's diary in the basement. I know she was trying to protect you." Tommy's eyes widened at the mention of his mother. His grip on the rifle loosened slightly, and his cracked lips moved as if trying to remember how to form words. "And mother," he stuttered, his voice rough from disuse. She saved me. Scout pressed closer against his leg, offering silent support. The dog's presence seemed to give Tommy strength, and more words tumbled out, broken but clearer. Father, he came that night. Mother heard him. His voice cracked with emotion. She pushed me into the basement, told me to stay quiet, no matter what. Ria's hands trembled as she slowly reached for her phone. Tommy, can I record what you're saying? It's important that people know the truth. He nodded hesitantly, and Ria carefully activated her phone's voice recorder. She locked the door. Tommy continued, his words halting, but filled with painful memory. I heard fighting, screaming, then silence. His eyes glazed with tears. Father killed her. I heard him say it, bragging, said she'd never keep me from him again. Scout whined softly, pressing his nose into Tommy's hand. The young man's fingers automatically tangled in the dog's fur, drawing comfort from the familiar touch. Scout was there, he said, a hint of warmth entering his voice. In the basement with me. Mother had put food down there. Water, blankets. Like she knew, he swallowed hard. Like she knew what might happen. Ria felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she recorded his testimony. How did you escape? Waited 2 days. Scout helped me stay quiet when Father searched the house. Then we ran into the woods. His face showed a flash of fierce pride. Mother taught me about the forest, how to survive. Said it might be important someday. The story poured out of him now. Years of silence finally breaking. He spoke of learning to hunt with simple traps, of finding shelter in caves and making lintos, of Scout helping him track game and stay warm during harsh winters. The dog had been his protector, his companion, his only link to human kindness through all these years. I promise you, Ria said earnestly, I won't let them dismiss this anymore. Your mother's diary, these recordings, they'll have to listen now. They'll have to investigate what your father did. At the word investigate, Tommy's whole demeanor changed. His body tensed and the rifle came up sharply, pointing at Ria's chest. No police. Fear flickered through Ria, but she noticed something crucial despite his threatening pose. Tommy's finger wasn't on the trigger. His eyes were wide with panic, not aggression. Scout immediately pressed against Tommy's legs, leaning heavily against him. The dog didn't bark or growl, just maintained steady contact, as if anchoring the young man to reality. Tommy's breathing, which had grown rapid and shallow, began to slow as he focused on the familiar weight of his faithful companion. Watching this interaction, understanding dawned in Ria's heart. This wasn't a dangerous man. This was a frightened child who had grown up in isolation, whose only experience with authority figures was violence and betrayal. The rifle wasn't a weapon of aggression. It was a shield against a world that had failed to protect him. Tommy, she said softly, I understand why you're scared. The police didn't help before. They didn't find you, didn't stop your father. But you're not alone anymore. The rifle trembled in his hands as Scout continued to press against him, the dog's steady presence doing more to calm him than any words could. Tommy's eyes darted between Ria's face and the forest behind her, as if calculating his escape route. We can do this slowly, Ria assured him, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. No sudden changes. But your mother wanted you to be safe, to have a real life. Scout has protected you all these years. Now let me help too. The mention of his mother seemed to reach something deep inside Tommy. The rifle lowered slightly, though his posture remained tense. Scout's tail wagged gently, and the dog looked up at Tommy with complete trust, as if saying this new human could be trusted too. Ria saw in that moment how this wild, wounded young man and this loyal dog had kept each other human through years of isolation. Scout had been more than just a companion. He had been Tommy's lifeline to love, to trust, to the gentler emotions his father had tried to destroy. With gentle persistence and Scout's reassuring presence, Ria finally convinced Tommy to come with her. The drive to the sheriff's office was tense. With Tommy pressed against the passenger door of her SUV, his eyes darting nervously at every passing car, Scout sat in the back with Ethan, the dog's steady presence helping to keep everyone calm. When they walked into the sheriff's office, the fluorescent lights made Tommy flinch. The bustling activity and sharp sounds of phones ringing caused him to grip Scout's fur tightly. Sheriff Daniels emerged from his office, his skeptical expression deepening the lines around his eyes. Ma'am, what's all this about? He asked, eyeing the disheveled young man suspiciously. Ria stood tall, her voice steady. Sheriff, this is Tommy Miller, the missing Miller boy from 10 years ago. The declaration caused an immediate stir in the office. Deputies stopped their work, turning to stare. Sheriff Daniels shook his head slowly. Now, Ms. Monroe, we've been through this. That case is… Listen to this, Ria interrupted, playing the recording from her phone. Tommy's broken voice filled the room, describing his mother's murder and his years of survival. The sheriff's expression shifted from dismissal to focused attention still. Protocol demanded verification. "We'll need to run some tests," Sheriff Daniels said, his tone gentler now. "Compare DNA with what we have on file from the original case." The next few hours were difficult. Tommy struggled with the unfamiliar procedures, but Rhea stayed close, explaining each step. They allowed Scout to remain by his side during the DNA swab, the dog's presence keeping Tommy from bolting when the medical technician approached. Ethan watched everything with wide, wondering eyes. He sat quietly in the waiting area, occasionally whispering questions to his mother. Did his mom really save him like that? He asked, his voice full of awe. "Yes, honey," Rhea answered softly. She loved him so much she gave everything to keep him safe. The DNA results came back days later, confirming what Rhea had known in her heart. This was indeed Tommy Miller, the boy who had vanished a decade ago. The news spread through the small town like wildfire. Local papers ran headlines about the miracle in the woods and lost son found after 10 years. As the full story emerged, the community was stunned by Clara Miller's sacrifice. The diary entries Rhea had found painted a heartbreaking picture of a mother's desperate plan to protect her child. Notes revealed that Clara had been secretly preparing the basement shelter for months, teaching Tommy survival skills. Knowing her husband's violence was escalating, the truth about the abusive father, who had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, finally came to light. Former neighbors came forward with stories they'd been too afraid to tell before. The man who had terrorized his family was at last condemned in the court of public opinion, his true nature exposed. Inside the sheriff's office, Tommy sat quietly as officials explained what would happen next. Social services would help him transition back to society. There would be counseling, support services, education opportunities. It seemed overwhelming, but Rhea noticed how he straightened slightly when they mentioned he could keep Scout. The dog had earned official support animal status. Ethan tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at a framed photo of Clara Miller that someone had brought in. "She looks kind," he whispered, "like she was brave." "The bravest," Rhea agreed, watching Tommy as he stared at his mother's picture. The young man's hands trembled as he reached out to touch the frame suddenly. Tommy's composure cracked. 10 years of held-back emotion broke free in racking sobs. "She told me to wait," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "She said someone would come, and he came." Scout pressed close, offering comfort as always. But now Rhea stepped forward too, placing a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder. Ethan moved closer as well, his young face full of compassion beyond his years. The scene touched everyone in the office deeply. Hardened deputies wiped their eyes discreetly. Sheriff Daniels turned away, clearing his throat roughly. This wasn't just a case being solved, it was a mother's last wish being fulfilled. A lost child finally found, a decade of silence finally broken. Through his tears, Tommy began to speak more clearly than he had since they'd found him. He described how his mother had kissed him goodbye that last time, how she'd made him promise to stay hidden until help came, how she told him she loved him more than life itself. Each word painted a picture of Clara's incredible courage and sacrifice, of love stronger than fear, of hope that somehow survived in the darkest places. For Ethan, watching this unfold was a profound lesson in the power of a mother's love. He stayed close to Rhea, occasionally reaching for her hand, as if reassuring himself of her presence. His young mind was processing how one parent could hurt, while another would give everything to protect. How love could sustain someone through years of loneliness. How hope could survive against impossible odds. The story would continue to unfold in the days ahead. There would be challenges and adjustments, healing and learning. But in that moment, in the sheriff's office, something beautiful and broken and honest filled the air. It was the sound of a lost child finally coming home, of a mother's love reaching across time, of truth breaking free from its long burial in the woods. Scout rested his head on Tommy's knee, the faithful companion who had bridged the gap between past and present, between survival and salvation. The dog's steady presence seemed to embody Clara's enduring protection, a living link to the mother who had saved her son with her last breath. As Tommy's tears slowly subsided, his hand found the old key he still carried, the key to the bunker where his mother's love had preserved his life. In the gentle afternoon light streaming through the office windows, it gleamed like a testament to hope, to survival, to the power of love to outlast even death itself. 6 weeks had passed since the day Tommy Miller emerged from the forest, and autumn had painted the Oregon woods in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The morning air carried a crisp sweetness that spoke of changing seasons and new beginnings. Scout, as the German Shepherd was now officially named, had settled perfectly into life with the Monroe family. Every night, he took his position at the foot of Ethan's bed, a faithful guardian whose watchful presence chased away any lingering fears. The dog's transformation was remarkable. His coat now gleamed with health. The old wounds healed into barely visible scars. He gained weight, and his eyes held a contentment that touched everyone who saw him. Tommy, too, was slowly finding his way back to the world. His mother's distant cousins in Portland had opened their home to him, providing a quiet space where he could begin the delicate process of adjusting to society. The therapist working with him reported small but significant progress each week. He was learning to sleep in a real bed, to use modern appliances, to trust in the permanence of regular meals. Words came easier now, though he still preferred the company of Scout to most humans. On this particular Saturday morning, Rhea and Ethan drove the now familiar road to the cabin. The local historical society, moved by Clara's story, had worked to preserve the site as a memorial. The exterior had been carefully restored, the windows cleaned, the porch repaired. A small brass plaque near the door told Clara's story in simple, dignified words. Scout sat in the back seat, his tail wagging gently as they approached. He seemed to understand the significance of these visits, always maintaining a respectful demeanor that was almost human in its sensitivity. "Look, Mom," Ethan pointed as they parked. "Someone's already left flowers." Indeed, a fresh bouquet of white roses lay on the porch steps. Tommy visited sometimes, always early in the morning when he knew no one else would be there. These quiet pilgrimages were part of his healing process, his therapist said. Rhea carried her own bouquet, wildflowers she and Ethan had gathered from their garden, the kind that Clara had once tried to grow around the cabin. The Historical Society had replanted some of the original flower beds, based on descriptions in Clara's diary, creating a living connection to the past. Inside, sunlight streamed through the clean windows, highlighting the careful preservation work. The furniture remained exactly as they found it, but now it was properly cleaned and restored. Clara's few possessions were displayed with respect: her worn Bible, her gardening gloves, the wooden spoons she'd used to cook her son's meals. Each item told part of her story. The toy truck, the one that had first helped them connect the cabin to the missing persons case, sat in a small display case. Beside it lay a photograph of Tommy as a child, holding the same truck, his smile bright and innocent before tragedy struck. Ethan moved quietly through the space, Scout at his heels. At 8 years old, he understood more than most children his age would. The cabin had taught him profound lessons about courage, sacrifice, and the boundless depth of a mother's love. They approached the trapdoor, no longer hidden under a rug, but preserved as the centerpiece of Clara's story. The Historical Society had installed proper stairs leading down to the bunker, though the original ladder remained in place as a testament to Tommy's years of survival. Rhea knelt and arranged the wildflowers at the entrance. The bunker itself was open to visitors now, carefully preserved with Tommy's permission. The children's drawings still lined the walls, protected behind clear panels. The small cot remained, along with the boxes of supplies Clara had so carefully gathered. Each item spoke of her desperate love, her determination to save her child at any cost. "She thought of everything," Rhea said softly, touching one of the preserved drawings. "Even made sure he had crayons and paper to help him feel normal." Scout whined softly, pressing against her leg. Even now, he seemed protective of this space, as if honoring his original mission to guard Tommy. They spent some time in quiet reflection, each lost in their own thoughts. Ethan traced the edges of the trapdoor with gentle fingers, his face thoughtful. The horror of what had happened here had been transformed into something else, a testament to love's power to overcome darkness. As they finally turned to leave, Rhea noticed Ethan lingering by Clara's Bible in its display case. The book was open to a passage she had marked: "Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things." Outside, the forest welcomed them with gentle rustling leaves and warm patches of sunlight. The path that had once seemed so threatening now felt like an old friend. Worn smooth by the feet of respectful visitors who came to learn Clara's story, they walked slowly, letting Scout lead the way. The dog moved with confidence, occasionally glancing back to make sure they were following, just as he had on that first fateful day. But now his manner was relaxed, peaceful, a reflection of how much had changed. Ethan's hand found Rhea's as they walked. He'd grown so much in these past weeks, not just in height, but in understanding. The mystery of the cabin had opened his eyes to both the darkness and light that existed in the world. And somehow he'd emerged with his faith and goodness intact. "Mom," he said suddenly, his voice clear and the forest quiet, "she saved him. And you saved us." Rhea squeezed his hand, emotion catching in her throat. The simple truth in his words touched something deep in her heart. Clara's courage had created ripples that reached far beyond her own time, touching lives she could never have imagined. Scout paused ahead of them, his proud silhouette framed by golden leaves. The forest stretched around them, no longer a place of hiding and fear, but a sanctuary, where healing had finally found its way into the light. The terrible secrets that had festered here for so long had been gently unearthed, exposed to the healing power of truth and compassion. Here, in this transformed space, love had indeed triumphed over fear. Clara's sacrifice had not been in vain. Her son was safe, her story honored, her courage remembered. And in saving Tommy, she had somehow reached across time to touch all their lives, teaching them about the enduring power of hope and the unbreakable bonds of love. The morning sun filtered through the canopy above, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across the path before them. Scout stood at attention, his presence a living bridge between past and present, while the forest whispered its ancient songs of renewal and peace. If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story written gently for the heart.